The Love Letter, Chapter 1, The Discovery. Charlotte Reed had always found solace in the smell of old books. There was something comforting about the scent of worn pages and faded ink. As a historian and writer, she spent her days in dusty archives, surrounded by volumes that had seen centuries of history. She was a woman in her early 30s with wavy auburn hair often pinned up carelessly, and dark-rimmed glasses that she adjusted constantly. She had a quiet beauty about her, a beauty that was often lost in the sea of oversized sweaters and practical flats. It was on a particularly cold afternoon in the fall when Charlotte stumbled upon the letter. She had been browsing through a quaint second-hand bookstore in Greenwich Village, looking for inspiration for her next novel. The book she pulled from the shelf was a first edition of an old poetry collection. It wasn't the poetry that caught her eye, though, but the delicate piece of parchment tucked between two pages. The letter was yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible. It was addressed to "My dearest Eleanor" and dated 1943. The handwriting was elegant and fluid, filled with passion and longing. As Charlotte read the words, her heart skipped a beat. The letter spoke of love, war, and the pain of separation. It was clear that whoever had written it had loved Eleanor with all his heart. But the letter had never been sent. It was still neatly folded, hidden away in the pages of a forgotten book. Chapter 2. A Mystery Unfolds. For days, Charlotte couldn't stop thinking about the letter. She wondered who Eleanor was, and why the letter had never reached her. The historian in her was determined to uncover the mystery, but the romantic in her was moved by the love and yearning in the words. After some research, Charlotte discovered that the letter had been written by a man named Henry Wright, a soldier who had fought in World War II. Eleanor, she learned, had been his sweetheart back home, but their story had taken a tragic turn. Henry had gone missing in action, and Eleanor had spent the rest of her life waiting for him, never knowing what had happened. The letter, it seemed, had been lost in the shuffle of time. As she pieced together their story, Charlotte couldn't help but feel connected to Henry and Eleanor. She imagined their love, their hope, and their heartbreak. But what she hadn't anticipated was how this discovery would change her own life. Chapter 3. The Chance Encounter. One rainy afternoon, Charlotte decided to visit a local historical society to see if they had any information on Henry Wright. As she stood at the counter explaining her research to the archivist, a man entered the room, shaking the rain from his coat. He had dark, tousled hair, a strong jawline, and an air of quiet confidence. His eyes were a piercing blue, and when they met Charlotte, something inside her stirred. The man introduced himself as Adam Sinclair, a journalist researching a story about wartime love letters. He had heard about Charlotte's discovery and was eager to learn more. As they talked, Charlotte found herself drawn to Adam's warmth and passion. He was intelligent, funny, and shared her love of history. There was an instant connection between them, one that neither of them could ignore. Over the next few weeks, Charlotte and Adam spent hours together, piecing together the story of Henry and Eleanor. They visited archives, interviewed elderly relatives, and even traveled to the small town where Eleanor had lived. With each step of their journey, they grew closer, sharing stories of their own lives, hopes, and dreams. Charlotte hadn't expected to find love in the midst of her research, but as she spent more time with Adam, she realized that he had awakened something inside her, a longing for connection and romance that she hadn't felt in years. Chapter 4. The Letter's Legacy. As Charlotte and Adam delved deeper into Henry and Eleanor's story, they discovered something extraordinary. Henry had not died in the war as everyone had believed. He had been injured and taken prisoner, eventually returning home years later. But by then, Eleanor had passed away, never knowing that her beloved had survived. Henry had lived the rest of his life alone, cherishing the memory of the woman he had loved. It was a bittersweet revelation, and as Charlotte read Henry's final letter to Eleanor, tears filled her eyes. The love that Henry and Eleanor had shared had been real, even if fate had kept them apart. The discovery of the letter had brought Henry and Eleanor's story to light, but it had also brought Charlotte and Adam together. As they stood on the steps of the old house where Eleanor had once lived, Adam took Charlotte's hand in his. The rain had stopped, and the sky was clearing with a faint rainbow appearing in the distance. "This letter brought us together," Adam said softly, his voice filled with emotion. "Maybe it's fate, too." Charlotte looked up at him, her heart full. She had spent so much of her life searching for stories of the past, but now she realized that her own story was just beginning. With Adam by her side, she felt ready to embrace whatever the future held. As they stood there, hand in hand, Charlotte knew that the love letter she had found wasn't just a relic of the past. It was a reminder that love could transcend time, and that sometimes the most beautiful stories were the ones waiting to be written.